you again for participating in InterCOMM today. We can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you and good afternoon. I'm going to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and how discussions surrounding youth mental health in the context of COVID-19 provide an opportunity to increase and improve mental health education in Canadian secondary schools. So first, for a little bit of background and context about what is happening. Canada is currently in the middle of a youth mental health crisis. There's a couple of different reasons for this, but to start, adolescents have some pre-existing mental health vulnerabilities. For example, onset in adolescence. There are some pandemic-related stressors that have worsened these effects. So the shift to virtual learning and
already are with, so they can't because you already have it.
The shift to virtual learning and the inconsistency in education delivery has caused a decline in academic performance, and that itself is a stressor. Inconsistent and constantly evolving public health measures, social isolation, grief and loss due to COVID-19, and anxiety.
Hi, Riley, it's Diane. I'm so sorry to interrupt. So your presentation is not in presentation mode right now. And for some reason, I didn't know if you intended to advance it to the second slide or not. Because what we're seeing is that center slide and then all your thumbnails on the left right now.
I see. Okay, hold on a sec.
So if you just want to say from possibly from beginning or from current slide, it will go to presentation mode.
Yeah, did that work?
No, not yet. Are you working with two screens?
Yes, I think that.
You might need to switch, like flip screens.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry.
No apology needed. I just feel badly about interrupting you. There you go.
No problem.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. This is the slide I was on. I was talking about how there are pre-existing mental health vulnerabilities for adolescents because of sort of the physiological stress state that they're in, and some pandemic-related stressors as well. So this is a well-documented situation. SickKids actually released a report on it. There's a lot of discourse going on in traditional and social media, as well as just in general, surrounding what are the best ways to mitigate this, particularly in the context of what the best approach is for schools. So to look at what the mental health curricula is in schools currently, basically it's not consistent across the country. To start, Alberta, Quebec, and New Brunswick do not have any mental health curricula at all. In the other provinces and territories, there are some recurring themes in the curricula. So that includes personal well-being and self-management, substance use, physical health as a way to help your own mental health. So for example, proper nutrition and exercise, the importance of community, social skills and relationship building, and physical safety. It's important to note that just because something is mentioned in the curriculum, it doesn't mean that it's covered in detail or in any meaningful way. PEI and BC have the best curriculum in terms of mental health, and by extension, Newfoundland and the Yukon as well. Another way of looking at it, personal development and self-management are the most commonly covered topics in mental health curricula, followed by social skills and community, physical health and safety. And this makes sense because a lot of times mental health is covered in physical education courses or other health and wellness courses. And then finally, critical thinking and substance use are the least commonly covered topics. So with this in mind, this is an opportunity for schools to add or improve on their mental health curricula. This would be an opportunity for them to proactively correct misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation going around on different channels about mental health, and because this demographic doesn't necessarily have any pre-existing background knowledge, this could be an opportunity for them to get there first. Educators have an automatic authority in terms of delivering information. They're a trusted source of knowledge. Schools would be shown to be taking action on federal, provincial, and territorial priorities. This is the most important one. There are immediate real-world applications to a mental health curricula right now, because a lot of these students are either going through mental health problems themselves, or they've noticed other people around them and their peers who are going through it. So this wouldn't be something conceptual. This would be something that can be applied immediately. It would also be a mental health intervention for somebody who is maybe going through a mental health problem, but doesn't have the vocabulary to express it. And finally, this could be an opportunity to have a tailored approach for a unique situation. So COVID-19 is a very unique situation. The shift to virtual learning and trying to perform academically and socially is a unique situation. And it would be helpful to have some resources that are more than just generic mental health advice. So now that we know the background as it pertains to mental health education in Canada, there's some literature to support what a mental health curricula should look like. So it's important to understand what the demographic that you're dealing with. So some common disorders among adolescents in terms of mental health include anxiety disorders, ADHD, mood disorders, schizophrenia, and eating disorders. Some of these disorders have onset in adolescence, and this is listed from earliest onset to latest onset. So anxiety disorders, mood disorders, in particular depression and bipolar disorder, and drug and alcohol dependence. Symptom presentation in adolescents is different than it is in adults. Oftentimes, from an educational point of view, this can show as emotional problems in females, behavioral problems in males, a decline in academic performance, increased and excessive irritability and fatigue, and substance misuse. Adolescents also have a different way of connecting and discussing their mental health. So in general, they prefer to disclose their mental health concerns to their friends. They spend a lot of time outside their homes or amongst different groups and can display different mental health issues in different ways to different people. So for example, school, work, extracurricular activities, and other examples. They self-report higher mental health concerns than their caregivers report for them. And this suggests a need for caregiver convergence, which I'll talk more about in a second. One of the goals of mental health curricula that was covered by the literature is the need to decrease specific stressors. So one of the ways that this can be done is through mental health education for parents and guardians. Speaking of caregiver convergence, this would be something where any person who is in charge of an adolescent in some way, so a coach, a teacher, a boss, even parents, guardians, other family members, they would have some education on what to look for and what different mental health issues would look like in different contexts. Next, there needs to be interventions that promote healthy eating, active living, and a positive social environment. So this is already tied in well with physical education curricula. An increased awareness of mental health and the signs of distress. This would lead for the ability of the students to self-manage and self-recognize their own mental health, as well as recognize distress in others. Another goal of mental health curricula should be to improve attitudes toward mental health and decrease stigma. Stigma is a negative stereotype that could lead to discrimination. There's a significant relationship between an increase in mental health knowledge and increased positive attitudes toward mental health. A couple different programs have been implemented across Canada, which involved teaching the students about mental health and just basic information surrounding it. And pre and post evaluations showed that attitudes significantly increased after this education and stigma decreased. And a decrease in stigma will allow people to feel more comfortable to reach out or to talk about their mental health if they need help. The next goal of the curriculum should be to instill healthy self-driven behaviors so that these students can self-regulate and self-identify their own mental health. A couple examples of this include self-disclosure, checking with their friends and peers' well-being, self-monitoring and early recognition, and mental health first aid guidelines. So for example, what to do if you or someone you know needs immediate help, what to say and where to go. There are some ways that this could be integrated into the curriculum, a few different strategies. So first, it needs to be integrated at the interpersonal, organizational, and community levels. As mentioned, it's not enough to just have it in the curriculum. It has to be completely integrated, because if there's the school culture or even the teacher's individual outlook on the situation, that is going to affect how the information is delivered, and it could make it less effective. Expectations need to be reasonable, and the information needs to be consistent in delivery. So it can't just be once in one grade. It needs to be something that is recurring and reinforced. And finally, there needs to be considerations for variability in resources across Canada. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all situation. There are different things to consider on what is available. Some channels that can be used to the advantage, in addition to the curriculum itself, include teacher-pupil interactions, the school support systems. The school culture is a very important one, and its attitudes towards mental health, official announcements, wellness programs if they are existing, and training for educators. With the background on what a mental health curriculum should look like, there are some first step applications that can be used. An outline for a program that could be implemented into one class is as follows. It could be an open level health and wellness course in the first or second year of high school. This is the best time because research shows that it's better to get this information across slightly before the onset of those disorders. So the earlier the better. It could be the length of about one course unit to start, which is about a month. Pre and post evaluation could measure the effectiveness to show later and add further to the curriculum and make it a more permanent thing. Some of the advantages to this is that it's rich in detail and guidance, but it is costly and resource intensive as well. The potential breakdown could be into 3 different modules based on the goals that were covered in the literature review. So first would be to improve mental health literacy. And what this means is not only better knowledge of mental health, but also knowledge of what to do about your own mental health, attitudes and stigmas, and healthy behaviors. A sample evaluative questionnaire could involve a 15-question questionnaire divided into 3 sections based on the program breakdown, using true and false statements and multiple choice up to 5 options. This has been shown to be effective with this demographic. It's what they're used to, and it would be inexpensive and easily distributed. But some potential disadvantages of this is that there's the potential for inaccurate or dishonest data, as well as ethical concerns surrounding bringing up this information, triggering something, and doing more harm than good. Any mental health communication should be based around these 3 key messages, which is to first normalize mental health and mental health issues. Secondly, empower the students to help themselves. And third, a call to action, which is to provide resources in their community or online that they could turn to. Some risks to implementing these things into the curriculum. It's important to consider that parents, political, and cultural groups have a large amount of influence on a curriculum's development. Resistance from these groups is possible if they believe that mental health is something that is overdiagnosed or exaggerated. In addition to this, mental health is controversial and sensitive, so it could be something that people think talking about does more harm than good. Educators are also burned out from COVID-19 and the constantly changing method of education, and they may be resistant to an additional change in the curriculum that they have to learn, as well as any pushback from the community. Some ways to mitigate these risks are to engage with the concerned groups and present them with the overwhelming data that suggests that there is a need for mental health education in schools. Initiatives could also be implemented to support teachers and educators during this time. So a phone line for members of the community to answer questions so that teachers don't have to, or a way to train educators so that they have the proper tools to deliver this information. They will also need to liaise with local clinics to make sure they have the capacity to take an increase in patients if that is the result of this curriculum. And finally, the most important way to mitigate this risk would be a thorough evidence-based and timely integration plan. So in summary, secondary schools are uniquely positioned to provide mental health education, particularly in the context of COVID-19, due to the fact that there is so much discussion and discourse surrounding what to do and calls for somebody to do something to help youth today. The goal of mental health education is to increase mental health literacy and knowledge. So this includes improved attitudes toward mental health, a decrease in stigma, and an increase in self-driven healthy behaviors. Thank you, and I'll be taking any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Riley, for this presentation. It's very clear that you have a lot of passion for it as well, that it's a topic that you really care about, and that you have some really very specific suggestions about what could be done. So I would invite everyone to either raise their hand or to put their notes in the chat so that we could actually go through them at this stage. If you have any questions or comments, thank you so much again for this presentation. I see that Louise Stahl raised her hand. Louise, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Riley. A great presentation. My question is, so you mentioned the use of telephone lines to help him for, I think, for the students to be able to reach out and not overload teachers. What other communication technologies could be used in this curriculum, or how could communication technologies be integrated in this curriculum? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of just community engagement and informing people about the changes to the curriculum or answering any questions, some technologies could be really simple infographics that are put on the school's website, potentially some mail outs. It depends on the resources of that particular school board. But if you are talking more broadly about different technologies that could be integrated into a curriculum, that could include a website that has the information that's needed, and it could be designed so that it's specific to that area with resources that are local, as well as more broad resources that are online. There could be some sort of communication channel available between the teachers and the pupils, and there could be other technologies that are implemented at the school-wide level. So, for example, we mentioned phone lines or infographics, or maybe some sort of office hours that could be added as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Eliza.
Yeah, so fabulous presentation and topic, one that I have a vested interest in. So this might be out of the scope of your investigation, but a common issue or comment that I have seen in education is, without even the prompting of, you know, bringing awareness and speaking openly about mental health, is that students are approaching their teachers or their professors with these issues and expecting to be counseled when, you know, the people in these roles have no formal training. So do you see that as a potential barrier? And if so, like how could schools overcome that, knowing especially in secondary schools, the limit of funding that there is to hire people in the first place, and let alone, you know, a secondary or tertiary role of a counselor.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something I talked about in the paper a little bit more in detail. Yeah, teachers are not going to be able, they shouldn't be expected to be mental health professionals. That's beyond the scope of their role. A teacher's main role should just be to provide the education that they are given. But there is the likelihood that students are going to come to them. In that case, I think one of the more important aspects of this integration would be training for the educators on how they deal with that. So I think some basic outlines of some common questions they would get. For example, you know, what to do, where to go, is this normal? These kind of questions, they could be equipped to answer those questions. And if they're not, or if they don't have capacity, there should be additional resources that they can point them to. So outside sources, outside clinics, online areas, or maybe teachers could refer them to a liaison who works in the schools who could help direct them to a better source as well.
Great, thank you.
Not seeing another hand raised or another question right now, so I actually have a question of my own to ask, and a comment as well. Just if people don't know, I mean, there is work being done right now as well at the university to enhance some of the resources that are available to professors and administration around these kinds of issues. I know because, again, I'm working with the special advisor on mental health and the Vice Dean of Students, and we're hoping to have some resources available very soon that do some of what you're talking about. I mean, I think some of it is already online, but we're working on enhancing those resources. But my question has more to do with the challenge of national curriculum in an area like this, where you know, the responsibility for education and health is provincial. So I was just curious whether you've noticed whether there are other examples of national curriculum or a vehicle for creating something now, or whether there's a vehicle for creating something nationally, or whether this is something that every single province is going to have to be committed to doing if, you know, they decided that they would like to.
Yeah, so curriculum is dependent, it's under the jurisdiction of the provinces and territories. So it would be the responsibility of the provinces and territories to develop the curriculum. I think where a national standard could come in is with guidelines and pressure. So federal pressure on the provinces and territories to add to their curriculum or to improve what's already there, and guidelines based on research on what their curriculum should look like, how much of it there should be when it's implemented. And it's up to the provinces and territories whether or not they want to adhere to that. But I think federal pressure would really help.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. I'm not seeing any other comments in the chat. Just excuse me for a second. I'm sorry, I've had a bug this week. And I see actually that Nathaniel has arrived. Were there any other closing comments that you had, Riley, about this great presentation?
Yeah, thank you. I guess just closing comments is that I think work is being done, and I think with this youth mental health crisis, there's going to be a pretty major shift going forward, and this is going to lead to better adjusted adults in the long run. Thank you.